Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm talking about the 2026 Texas Senate race and that Republican U.S. Senator John Cornyn has tapped Republican Chris LaCivita for a super PAC in Texas GOP Senate primary. Now you may be wondering, okay, why is this big news? Well, Cornyn getting the help of Republican Chris LaCivita, who is a top political advisor to President Trump, to help him beat back a primary challenge from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. This is important because it talks about several of the aspects of this Republican primary in this Senate race. LaCivita's involvement, as the article mentions, does not guarantee an endorsement will come from President Trump and what's expected to be the GOP's most expensive Senate primary. But it does show how Cornyn, who has long been regarded as a more country club establishment Republican, more so than a Make America Great Again Republican, is now trying to align himself more with the president in hopes of surviving this Republican primary challenge. A recent poll commissioned by the Senate Leadership Fund, the main GOP leadership super PAC, showed Cornyn losing to Ken Paxton by over double digits. I have those polls up on another page as well. But even before that poll was out, Cornyn was making moves to bolster his Trump bona fides and boasted about his 99% voting record with Trump. Paxton, meanwhile, is accusing Cornyn of being a faux Trumper. LaCivita is joining Texans for a conservative majority, a super PAC supporting Cornyn's re-election bid as a senior advisor. Cornyn has also tapped Tony Fabrizio, another senior Trump strategist, to work on his campaign, essentially being Cornyn's top pollster for his campaign. The contest between Cornyn and Paxton's fight is shaping up as a rematch of the 2024 primary battle pitting Trump versus Ron DeSantis for the Republican nomination for president. Paxton has hired Axiom, a prominent Republican consulting firm, to help guide his campaign. Trump World has developed a disdain for Axiom and its leader Jeff Rowe for his work on behalf of DeSantis. Trump has savaged Rowe in private, and LaCivita and Fabrizio seem to enjoy going after the strategist in public. Rowe himself is not involved in the race, though others involved in the firm are, according to a person familiar with the arrangement. Texans for a conservative majority has also tapped Aaron Whitestead as executive director, Mike Shields to oversee its media efforts, and Eric Iverson as its pollster. LaCivita is also advising former Michigan Representative Mike Rogers, who is running for Senate. I couldn't be more proud of the first-class team that we've built to vigorously execute an outside effort to support Senator Cornyn's re-election, Whitehead said in the statement. Okay, so this may not seem like much, but this is actually very important news. Because when you look at the 2026 Texas Senate race, this is four-term Republican incumbent Senator John Cornyn. He was reelected in 2020 and is running for a fifth term. But Cornyn has faced a lot of recent statements and accusations about being a quote-unquote rhino, and that so much so has gotten the run from Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, trying to primary out Cornyn. And Paxton's main critique is that Cornyn is a rhino. And as is mentioned, Paxton's early announcements and such have highlighted his ads shown him around Mar-a-Lago, and that John Cornyn's really been nowhere to be found. So Paxton's trying to hit Cornyn on this tough. And Cornyn, I think, knows that this Republican primary is going to be a matchup of who's more loyal to the president versus who's not. A lot of Republican primaries nationwide now have become that. Who's more loyal to the president, and the one who isn't as loyal oftentimes ends up losing the primary. It's worth noting John Cornyn, Renee Mann, and Ken Paxton are all running in this Republican primary. U.S. Representative Wesley Hunt from Texas' 38th District has also expressed interest in running. If he were to enter this race, that could certainly change things up as well and change the polling dynamic up. But right now, it's Cornyn versus Paxton. And Paxton's been framing Cornyn as the rhino, as the moderate, as the Republican not loyal to President Trump, and Paxton is the Republican loyal to President Trump. Now, Cornyn's obviously disputed that, and he's gone after Ken Paxton's own political issues with being impeached, I believe, last year or 2 years ago. So Paxton has his own political baggage as well, probably way more baggage than John Cornyn does. But Paxton's been trying to frame Cornyn as a rhino, and thus far in the early polling, it seems that it's working. It is worth noting that Cornyn does have the endorsements of John Thune, Tim Scott, Rick Scott, and Bill Hagerty. Thune and Scott are very significant because these two are the leaders of the Senate Majority Leader and the U.S. Senator in charge of trying to get more Republicans elected, the NRSC. So it's interesting they both endorsed John Cornyn. Ken Paxton has the endorsement of two U.S. representatives. President Trump has thus far yet to weigh in on this race. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, saying both of them are his friends, have also refused to endorse in this race. The only financial records we have right now show John Cornyn with about 5.5 million cash on hand. But the early polls that have been done so far, they've all been Republican, or mostly they've all been Republican pollsters, but from varying degrees here, they all have Paxton leading. Qantas Insights, who another Republican poll, shows Paxton leading 52-39 over Cornyn, way outside the 4.4% margin of error. The Terrence Group, a Senate leadership fund which the article mentioned, which supports John Cornyn, shows Paxton winning 56-40, a 16% win in that poll. Brad Larskal, a Republican pollster as well from the middle of April, shows Paxton leading over Cornyn 50% to 33%. Most of the polls show Paxton breaking that 50% threshold, only a handful of them don't. So if John Cornyn right now, if the primary held today, looks like Cornyn's going to lose this matchup. And that's why I think Cornyn's bringing in this top Trump pollster, top Trump advisor to try and change the image in this race and get things back going to his side. Because Cornyn knows right now if the election were held today, he's probably going to lose the Republican primary. I mean, the numbers don't lie. Even though there's only been a handful of polls, the highest support Cornyn has reached is 40% in the poll that was sponsored on behalf of him and his campaign. 40% of the vote. Paxton's lowest support thus far, one poll had him at 38%, the other poll had him at 42%. So Paxton's second lowest numbers in a poll still has him beating Cornyn's highest by 2. There's obviously the good news for Cornyn is there's still a decent amount of undecided vote in some of these polls. The most recent polls, though, show that there's really not as much undecided vote as Cornyn would like. For Cornyn to win this race, it seems like he's going to have to take some of the vote that Paxton has gotten and chip away some of those voters, as well as shore up all the undecided vote. That's going to be very tough for him to do. One thing that can change this race would be if President Trump threw an endorsement behind John Cornyn. Right now, it looks like Ken Paxton is going to win this Republican primary, but if Trump were to endorse John Cornyn and essentially make the argument of Cornyn's voted with me a lot and he can win the general election and he's skeptical if Ken Paxton can, that would probably sway at least 2 or 3% of these Republican supporters that Ken Paxton currently has, enough to get Paxton under that 50% threshold, which opens the door for Cornyn to win the Republican nomination. But that's a big if. President Trump thus far has said he likes both candidates and he has been staying out of the race. It'll be interesting to see if after this news, Trump decides to jump in and support this, because right now, it seems like Ken Paxton is going to defeat John Cornyn. John Cornyn does not really have much of a pathway to victory in winning this Republican primary unless something changes. Getting Trump's advisor to help could certainly change things. Getting an endorsement from the president would help him a lot. Trump's endorsement carries a lot of weight in this race. Maybe if he does, Paxton's numbers will go down. He's at 50% support right now. If Trump's endorsement got Paxton down to 40 to 35%, that opens the door for Cornyn, but that's a big if, and something that Cornyn probably can't be banking on right now. I'm sure him and his team are working probably very hard to get Trump's endorsement, but that's something that right now would probably not be enough to bank on to win this primary. On the Democratic side of things, two Democrats, Colin Allred and Beto O'Rourke, both past Democratic nominees for U.S. Senate in 2018 and 2024, have expressed interest in running again. Early rankings for this race, Inside and Cook Politico have it as solid Republican. Sabato has it likely. Racial White House has it lean. And the reason that Democrats are feeling optimistic about this race is one poll from Brad Parscale, a Republican pollster, which showed Colin Allred defeating Ken Paxton 52% to 37%. Now, I would bet on everything that come Election Day, this vote will be an outlier, and whether it's Ken Paxton or John Cornyn, the Republicans are probably going to win this race. But if Ken Paxton does successfully primary challenge John Cornyn, and polls going into Election Day show the Democrats winning, well, then that's certainly going to be a very big problem for the Republicans, because even if the Republicans end up winning the Senate race, which I do think no matter what is going to happen, just looking at the recent election results in the state of Texas, it was a 13.5-point win for Trump in 2024. It was only 5.6 in 2020 after being a 9-point win for Trump in 2016. So Texas seems to have returned to its likely to almost safe Republican status. In 2024, Ted Cruz won by about 8.5%. Even if Paxton wins Texas, or even if Texas goes for the Republicans in 2026, even if it's a very close margin, that actually could end up helping the Democrats, because Republicans would then need to spend a considerable amount of resources to support Paxton and ensure that he wins that race, which may be able to hurt Republican resources that are spent on states like Georgia or North Carolina or Michigan or Maine or New Hampshire, or maybe even defending other Republicans that could be in trouble, like in Ohio or Iowa. So I think Democrats are going to want Texas without a doubt in 2026. I don't think personally it happens. I think the Republicans are going to hold on and win Texas, whether it's Paxton or Cornyn, but the margin of victory may be very different. If it's Cornyn, I think it's probably around a 10-point victory. If it's Paxton, I think closer to a 6.5 to 7-point victory is probably where things start out right now. But this is very interesting because this move by Cornyn not only plays a very drastic effect on the primary, it could also have a very important effect on the general election as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts, and I hope to see you in a future video.